Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hi, everybody. It's Tom Woods. Welcome to episode 2678 of The Tom Woods Show. And I know that during the COVID years, I had plenty to say on that subject, but my gosh, 5 years on, it's really been an opportune moment to look back and reflect and draw conclusions and maybe run some victory laps. These are hollow victories after what was done to us, but we need to rub this in their faces as much as possible, because what usually happens is we're right about something, but the other side runs the narrative and defines the way people think about things. And so no matter how right we are, the high school textbook is going to say we were wrong. So that's why I think now and again we have to keep on harping on this. So I happened to give a presentation at the Mises Institute summer program just days ago on this very subject, and I think it brings together a whole lot of the considerations that I brought to bear at the time, as well as many of the graphical representations of what was going on that I think really embarrass the official narrative. So here we go. I hope you enjoy it. All right, so today I'm going to talk about a topic that more or less everybody associates with me now or expects me to talk about, and it is the topic of a book I never thought I would write, because I thought I was out of the book writing world as of 2014, because it's hard to write books and it's exhausting, and I just didn't feel like doing it. I thought I have nothing more to prove. I've already written a dozen of them. I don't need to do any more. But doggone it, this thing was so hideous, I couldn't not write it. So it's called Diary of a Psychosis. And this style with the black background, the white typewriter, and it's like a 1950s typewriter, like somebody was typing up your mental health diagnosis in an asylum somewhere. It looks like that. That was my idea. I said, that's what I want this cover to look like. And the idea of the book is not that I'm going to have a chapter on what lockdowns did, or a chapter on masks, and a chapter on vaccines, or anything. That's not how it's organized. It is organized, in effect, like a diary, so that you recall, or for people reading it well into the future, hear about for the first time what it was like, the texture of life during those years. Not just a sanitized, well, they did this, then this, then this, and it had this result. It's kind of as it's happening, well, now they're doing this, and now they're saying that. And here's the opposite of what they said the other day, and they're putting that forward with a straight face. And here's a chart that tells you the opposite story of what they're telling us. And it preserves maybe some of the oddball details that you would tend to forget in a general survey. But I didn't forget, because I was writing about this like a fanatic on a daily basis for years, because I was very interested in this subject, because it affected me directly, and it affected many people who were in much more vulnerable positions than I was directly, and many people were suffering for no good reason, and I just couldn't see how it was possible not to write about this, or how it was possible for me to write my regular email newsletter about a topic other than this. This is the huge topic of the day. We have to discuss it. There's so much involved here. There's the corruption of this institution, corruption of that institution. There's the state and coercion. I mean, there's so much to talk about here. And I will say there were other. Look, I'm not trying to start a fight here. But there were other libertarian institutions, let's say, that would publish articles like "The Problem with Civil Asset Forfeiture." Now, look, I yield to no one in my opposition to civil asset forfeiture. But in June 2020, that ain't the time. You know, like there are huge fish to be fried here, and that ain't one of them. So I did this. Now, we all remember the origins of this, and I'm fortunate that I lived in Florida during this time, because my kids' lives were mostly normal. But not entirely, because we did travel, and they would see how odd things were, and they would hear the news. And I had to make sure and explain to them, this is not normal. I don't want you growing up thinking if they try this again, oh, I remember when they did that before. Yeah, I guess we do that every once in a while. No, we don't. No, we don't. So they all have a copy of the book, all 5 of my daughters. They all have a signed copy of the book from Dad. But so we remember, or at least I remember very distinctly, late 2019, reading the headlines that this novel virus, SARS-CoV-2, has appeared in China, and it's gradually beginning to spread around the world. So I thought, well, I'll keep an eye on that. I don't know, who knows what will come of that. Nobody exactly knew how the governments of the world were going to react to that. But early on, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, was telling people that you shouldn't go around wearing a mask. That's silly, and there's no reason for that. And that younger people in particular should continue to feel free to travel on cruise lines, carry on with their lives more or less as normal. Well, obviously we remember that didn't last particularly long. Before we knew it, everything was being shut down. So culture and the arts were just shuttered. People, other than those who were deemed to have quote-unquote essential jobs, were ordered to stay in their homes. And as we know, some countries enforced that requirement with more savagery than others. But everything, gyms, restaurants, schools, retail stores, everything closed down, although restaurants would serve you food to go and stores selling necessities remained open. If you had to be in public, you had to observe so-called social distancing. So you keep 6 feet between yourself and another person. They, of course, as you know, they later admitted that 6-foot rule was arbitrary, but they had to say something, so they said 6 feet. And so by complying with these and a considerable array of other requirements, we could thereby, quote-unquote, flatten the curve. And I hate recalling all this dumb propaganda. Flatten the curve. Yeah. So I hope some of you are familiar with the term midwit. A midwit is not a stupid person. A midwit is somebody with an IQ of about maybe 98 to 105. So somebody who's good at like regurgitating what the teacher says, like that's a midwit. Not like an outright moron and not a genius, a midwit. So what happened was a lot of the folks, let's say, on one side of the bell curve, were saying, well, these requirements all seem kind of dumb. And then we'd get to the midwit population. Well, you see, we have to flatten the curve, which means we spread the infections out so as not to overrun the hospitals. Yeah, I've heard that from every official outlet for the past 2 weeks in a row. And they think if they just repeat it to me, then I'll go along. But I've already heard it, So people on the other side of the bell curve are saying, yeah, this is all pretty stupid. Like this, I have a funny feeling this is pretty stupid, and I have a really good sense that I'm going to be vindicated on this. Well, 15 days to slow the spread then became the public health slogan, but that public health emergency would be officially in effect for over 3 years. And so during that time, if you questioned any of these policies, if you said that their basis in science was dubious, if you noted the horrendous and widespread collateral damage, well, you were demonized, your voice was suppressed, you were accused of being callous with respect to human life. Well, several months ago, I spoke at a Mises Institute event in Arizona, and that event was about bureaucracy. So I thought I would reread Mises' 1944 book, Bureaucracy, and apply some of Mises' insights. Bureaucracies, as we know, Mises says, they're rigid and they prioritize compliance with the rules over adapting to new information. So Mises explains why that is so. I'm simply telling you that it is so. Bureaucracies always are looking to expand their scope and justify their existence. They often exaggerate problems or create new ones to maintain their relevance and power. Now that sounds familiar enough, I think. Mises said this: the bureaucrat's opportunity to derive profit from his activities is much greater than that of the average citizen. Every expansion of government activities increases his chances for promotion and power. All right, so inflexibility, an obsession with rule following, and grasping for more power. That sounds a teensy-weensy bit like what went on with the public health establishment during COVID. I will never forget how angry Anthony Fauci was that a federal judge had said that you don't have to wear masks on airplanes anymore. He was so angry. He said, this is a matter for public health to decide, not the Justice Department. So think about what he's saying. He's basically saying public health should be superior to the legal system, and we ought to be able to make decisions that no one can challenge. That's grasping for more power. Mises is thinking of Anthony Fauci in that description. But probably the most significant bureaucratic offense was the nonstop spread of propaganda, even while at the same time it had the nerve to accuse other people of spreading misinformation. Mises said, propaganda is one of the worst evils of bureaucracy and socialism. Propaganda is always the propaganda of lies, fallacies, and superstitions. Indeed. And were we ever subjected to propaganda? In particular, we were subjected to this moralizing narrative that said that people and places that obey the so-called public health guidelines, so lockdowns, masks, capacity restrictions, and so on, they're going to have relatively good results, but the stupid and selfish science haters who disregard the guidelines are going to get what's coming to them. Well, this story the regime fed us does not survive a glance at the charts. And I brought some with me. I brought some charts with me. So it was obvious from the very early contact tracing study in Iceland in the winter of 2020 that schools were no danger, and studies involving Google mobility data were finding no connection between health outcomes and mobility versus staying at home. But we'll start with a couple of outstanding examples. Now, I'm going to use this screen in just a moment to share some of my charts. I didn't make the charts, but I found them, and I know the people who did. And like Ian Miller, for example, in California, was an absolute hero through this. And I do want to share some of these with you. And I compiled these particular ones. I have hundreds of them. I compiled these particular ones for a debate I was supposed to do at the Soho Forum in New York City, hosted by our friend Gene Epstein. Now, I debated Michael Malice, as you may know, on the subject of Alexander Hamilton 10 years ago. So if you type in Malice, Woods, Hamilton on YouTube, you're in for some real entertainment. But then after I beat him, and I beat him badly, let's just be honest about it. And I don't mean that I have this subjective sense that I beat him. These are Oxford-style debates where they poll the audience before and after. So you have an objective measure of the winner. And I'm telling you, I was the winner. Then I didn't do any more debating. And so Gene called me the Bobby Fischer of debating. Now, none of you are going to get that, but Bobby Fischer was the chess champion who didn't want to defend his championship. He did come out of retirement finally, defended his championship, and then went back. But anyway, so I finally did do a debate. So I assembled these, and then the other debater didn't show up. But that was because he had a terrible personal tragedy, honest to goodness. So we still had the event. Like he had his opening statement, Gene read it, I read my opening statement, then we had an evening of questions. But when I heard his opening statement, it was all fluff. Like, there was a part of me that thought, maybe I overlooked something, and maybe I'm going to have the indignity of finding out just what I overlooked on a live stage being, live streamed all over the world. That doesn't sound particularly appealing. So I sat there with a legal pad ready to take notes as I sat in the audience listening to what would have been my debater's opening statement. And I was ready to take notes and get ready to respond. 3/4 of the way through, I unclicked my pen and said, this is not a problem. It was all fluff. And I thought, what could I have overlooked? I have all the evidence. I have all the charts. I have all the arguments. What could there be? Answer, nothing, apparently. Nothing. I couldn't believe it. But I didn't get a chance to debate the guy, unfortunately. But I'm going to share the slides with you guys. But first, let's start with two outstanding examples that don't require charts. And that is March 2020 through, the first few months after that, and Sweden. Now, we all know, like, we're all tired of hearing about it, that Sweden more or less proceeded as normal. But what some people don't realize is that they wound up having the best excess death numbers in Europe, like lower than anybody's. The best. They outperformed everyone. Now, if I had asked lockdowners in March 2020, suppose Sweden has such a laissez-faire policy that you people spend months at a time screaming at them at the top of your lungs, do you think they will wind up having the best results in all of Europe? They would have laughed at that, right? They would have laughed at it. But that's what happened. And yet, are any of them required to answer for this? Gee, I guess I had this as wrong as a person could possibly have anything wrong. No, of course not. Hey, gang, if you're a business owner or run a team in a large company and you want to stop paying high prices for software, regain your digital sovereignty, and want software that's flexible, you need to use Federated Computer. Federated Computer provides all the software you need for your business or team without the high prices, no creepy data collection, and total flexibility to use your software for your business goals. What's more, a typical Federated Computer customer saves $300 per month per employee. With Federated Computer, you get email, calendar, groupware, file management, Office 365 documents, spreadsheets, presentations, video conferencing, group chats, CRM, databases, appointment management, and so much more. They don't charge by the user. Instead, you pay a single low monthly price for your business. How does $120 per month for your whole business sound? And that's for everything. Tom Woods Show listeners have been saving big using Federated Computer. A dental practice reduced its monthly software costs by $7,000 per month. A construction firm saved so much money, they were able to hire a salesperson to increase sales. Tom Woods listener companies use Federated Computer to talk privately with each other without worrying conversations are going to end up part of some AI chatbot. No need to worry about change. Federated Computer customer support is there to help you every step of the way. I still don't understand the magic these guys must employ to make it all happen. Now, only for the Tom Woods audience, if you use code WOODS at checkout, you'll save even more, 30% off your first year. They even offer a free month to check things out. How do they do it? Federated Computer is run literally by the same people who invented cloud computing. These guys know their stuff. They enjoy empowering customers with tools to find success in your business. Do yourself a favor. Take advantage of this offer now. Use code WOODS for 30% off your first year at federated.computer. That's federated.computer. And we don't have to speculate on what they would have said because we can just look at what they did say. You know, Sweden will be an example of what not to do. It's going to be a bloodbath, a killing field, whatever. All right, well, apparently these measures were not essential. If you could do that and you just carry on and you have the best record of anybody. Now, if this were a normal country, that would have been all over the media, would have been everywhere. Like, how could the expert class have gotten this so wrong? And it's not even like this is debatable. They said X and not X occurred. I mean, that's as cut and dried as it can be, but absolute silence. Now, you and I were urged to listen to the experts. Now, if you can utter the phrase, listen to the experts without snickering today, you know, you have a stronger stomach than I do. I certainly can. The experts had no idea what was going on either. That's the thing. They didn't have any idea what was going on. So, you know, if you're afraid that you're going to blaspheme against our new priestly class, you know, which adorns itself in lab coats and clipboards instead of the cassock and the beretta, by wondering if these measures did any good, well, rest assured, they had no idea what was going on either. One of my proudest things about the past 5 years is something I didn't even do myself. But there is a video, 2 or 3 minutes long, that one of our great libertarian creators, Dan Smots, created for me at diaryofcovid.com. And that is the best book promotion video I have ever seen. Made me want to go out and get it, and I wrote the thing. All I gave him was I said, you use your imagination how you want to do this. I just need you to make sure that a couple of particular clips make it into this video. And so, and by the way, so at that site, I also sell the book at cost. But even if you get it at the Mises Institute, still go to diaryofcovid.com because you can claim your bonuses. You get bonuses for getting the book. Get them at the website. Anyway, here's what I asked him to make sure went in that video. In early 2021, Andy Slavitt, which is a name that will ring bells only to people who follow this very closely, he was a White House COVID advisor. I mean, if there is a lower than low title you could have, I don't know what it is. But he was on MSNBC, of all places. MSNBC actually asked him a tough question for a change. Took them about a year, but eventually they asked a tough question. And they said, look, why are the numbers in California and Florida so similar when their policies are so different? I mean, according to you, shouldn't Florida be like a graveyard and California be a paradise? And here was his answer. And so I've captured this forever on the site in that video. Because he's probably thinking, well, nobody remembers this little clip from early 2021. But he is not counting on my fanaticism about this issue. So he said, there's so much of this virus that we think we understand and we think we can predict that's just a little beyond our explanation. So his answer is, I don't actually have an answer. We don't understand that either. But then he went on to say, but we all know what works. And then he listed all the policies that, by his own admission, had not made any difference at all in these two states, even when you correct for the age difference between the states, which is a very important correction to make. So then somebody finally asked Anthony Fauci a similar question. They finally asked him. Took them about a year and a half. And they said, because he had said, if you obey me, you will get better results. Okay, so then Texas reopened and there weren't corpses at the side of the road. So they asked Fauci, what do you think's going on there? And his answer, and again, this is us at the site. This is in that video forever. He thinks, oh, people will forget that I said that. No, Woods is like an elephant in that way, you know? It's up here in the old noodle, and now it's in the video. His answer was, maybe they're doing things outdoors. Like they took all of Texas and brought it outside. Was the best he could come up with. You know, and I've said this before. I know that we have contempt for these people. But on some level, you know, like they're not stupid. Like the point, there are stupid people out there. These people aren't stupid per se. You know, maybe they're sinister. Maybe they could be a lot of things. They're not stupid. So you think to yourself, well, maybe if they were cornered with a question like this, maybe they have a very sophisticated response. Maybe they've got something to see with your own eyes and hear with your own ears that they have nothing is brutally refreshing. I don't know how else to describe that, but there it is. There it is. And again, suppose I had asked in March 2020, suppose California adopts these policies and Florida adopts those, what's going to happen? Well, of course, what we would have been told, Florida will be a bloodbath. But again, with the excess deaths thing, Florida ended up doing better than California. Ended up doing better. Now that's not possible, according to what we're told. That's not possible. But that's what happened. And yet, Ron DeSantis, you can criticize him on numerous grounds, but only a dope would have called him Death Santis, which is what they did. I live in Florida. They called him Death Santis because of all the COVID deaths in Florida. And yet, he did better than California, and it's not like Death Newsom. You know, like, I mean, wouldn't even dawn on them to say that. Wouldn't even dawn on them. All right. What else do I want to say about this? All right. Well, maybe we can start looking at some charts here. Now that I've whetted your appetite for some charts and I got the button all ready to go. All right. Here comes chart number one. How about we plot the 25 most stringent states against the 25 least stringent states. So notice I have not indicated which one is which. I will in a second tell you which one is which, but in a way, does it really matter? Because they're essentially, for all intents and purposes, identical. Now, they shouldn't be, right? I mean, if you're going to disrupt people's lives and ruin their livelihoods and decimate their savings and compromise their health and all these other things that were done and destroy their dreams and everything, there damn well better be a pretty obvious difference in these two lines. Okay, so these are the most stringent states. So I just highlighted that. I mean, what, like that? We did it for this, like that. Now, how many Americans have seen a chart like that? Probably roughly the number of people who are in this room. Because I don't know if even Fox News showed charts like this, but that tells you a story. But I got a bunch more of these. I got a whole bunch. I mean, this settles it, in my opinion, but I'm a sport, you know? I'm a sport. I'll keep going anyway. Mises Institute asked me to speak for a certain amount of time. I said, okay. So right now we're looking at the 12 Midwestern states. And again, I have not indicated which one is which, because for this, it doesn't strictly matter. But I want to see if we can find Thanksgiving on the chart. Because remember, you weren't supposed to have Thanksgiving with people. Or if you did, you know, you had to sit 3 states away and shout through a bullhorn or whatever. So we should be able to see some spike on this graph that would help us identify where Thanksgiving is. Now, remember the wait 2 weeks thing. You know, so there would be a gathering and we'd say, that's funny. The college football national championship just occurred and there's no result. And they'd say, well, you wait 2 weeks and then they'll get what's coming to them. I mean, these people were ghouls. They were ghouls. They'll get what's coming to them. And then 2 weeks would come and go and nothing would happen. But they're already on to the next thing. All right. So if it's true that you have to wait 2 weeks before you see the spike up, then maybe Thanksgiving is around here. Maybe like there, and then 2 weeks later you get the big spike. All right, let's see where Thanksgiving actually is. All right, that was my guess. That's where Thanksgiving is when the numbers are actually on the decline. And then 2 weeks later, it would have been about there. Christmas is not even on this graph. I mean, you don't see there's no indication that Christmas occurred. Now, was there anybody saying, doggone it, maybe we just don't understand what's going on here. Maybe we should show a little humility. Nothing about the guidance changed as a result of this. All right. I'm dying to go on. Let's go on to another one then. Why not? Mask mandate states versus no mandate. Now, given the absolute hysteria surrounding mask wearing, you would think there's going to be a huge difference between places that mandate masks and places that don't. And, there you go. And then, by the way, they all look like this. They all look like this. And when they don't, occasionally you get a little bit of variance. So we had some early research done by the CDC released, and it had to do with a couple of counties in Kansas that were contiguous, but that had different masking policies. And the county that did not require masks had a line that was higher than the one that did. And they said, well, there you go. And then they ended the study, or they ended the period that they were going to look at. Well, some of us have access to all the data, so we extended it out. And it turns out that the reason that they stopped it there was that a few days later, exactly the opposite trend occurs. But that's never mentioned. There was no follow-up. There was no nothing. So, it's not like they're just trying their best and they accidentally fall down on the job. Like, that's just a liar. That's just flat out. That's just a liar. All right. Here are a couple of states that I haven't labeled, but I'm going to tell you which states they are, but not which line is which. So we have here California and Nevada. Now, California, Nevada, and Arizona, if we were to trace all three of those, they had similar trajectories the entire time. And yet California was rigidly locked down. Nevada, a purple state, was more in the middle. And Arizona, of those three, was the least locked down. And yet the curves were pretty much identical. So there's California, the blue, and there's Nevada, that was less locked down. So, we should be seeing very dramatic stories being told here that back up the narrative, but we just don't. The charts refuse to show them. Now, I want to say something about the state of Iowa. You may recall that the Washington Post called Iowa, quote, a state that doesn't care if you live or die. They're super fair, Washington Post. A state that doesn't care. Why did they say that about Iowa? Because Iowa got rid of, around February 2021, all the state level restrictions. And so, we know these restrictions have been working really, really awesomely well. So Iowa is going to be an absolute bloodbath. Okay. Well, that didn't happen. That did not happen. So Elaine Godfrey in The Atlantic wrote in November 2020, public health experts predicted another big surge after the holidays, but it never came. I went back to those experts to find out why. See, that's what's wrong with American society. I went back to those experts who predicted something that didn't happen. I went back to them for some insight. No, you go back to them for some apologies, and you go to the neglected people for the insights. All right. So she wrote a follow-up article because she figured out why it was that Iowa didn't have a big surge after all, after the holidays. And the answer was Iowans were scared into taking the virus seriously. She figured it out. She said the Iowa public health establishment scared the hell out of everybody. And therefore, everybody complied and stayed home, and then we kept the numbers down. The problem with that is that there were simultaneous declines just like Iowa's in a whole bunch of places that hadn't changed their messaging at all. So we're supposed to believe that the public health people in Iowa were so scary that they scared not just Iowa, but also North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota, Missouri, Illinois, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and Kansas. These are some scary SOBs, right? Hulk Hogan, may God rest his soul, has nothing on them. So they all had identical curves. So they also tried to claim that Iowa's November mask mandate had brought the numbers down. But again, this is special pleading. There were plenty of places that didn't have that mandate. They had the same decline. All right, so now Iowa, though, after February 2021, Iowa should really be an outlier among the Midwestern states, right? Its numbers must have shot through the roof. So here are various Midwestern states. That green line shows when the restrictions were lifted in Iowa. So which one of these is Iowa? Well, first of all, not really any of them is a particular outlier. Maybe that green one, but that's a really delayed outlier. There's Iowa, like right in the middle. Nothing particularly noteworthy about it. That's the state that doesn't care if you live or die. Was anyone apologized to in Iowa for having such a horrifying thing said about, well, these people? Apologies from these people? Forget it. Absolutely forget it. All right. How about, let's see what else I got up here. Let's just start going through them. Let's see what else I got up here. Germany and Sweden. All right. Very similar curves, but you can see the American media, like The Atlantic, trying its best to attribute the moves in Germany's numbers to masks and other interventions. But again, Sweden's getting the same numbers, and it's not doing those things, but Sweden just does not get mentioned. Now that's Poland. Now there's their mask mandate. And so what was happening in Western Europe and the United States was that would happen, and then you'd see it would be flat, and people would say, you see, if we weren't all such dum-dums in America, if we weren't all like King of the Hill, if we weren't all so stupid, we would have done what Poland did and what the Czech Republic did, because look at the results they get. And then this happens, and there's no follow-up report. There's nothing. Maybe we're oversimplifying this. Maybe we're making this into a cartoon. No mention. Czech Republic. Okay, Czech Republic has a life-saving lesson for America. Wear a face mask. Then the right-hand part of the graph occurs. No mention, no follow-up, nothing. So you might start to get the impression these people are misleading you, So then we would start to get, we never said masks alone would solve the problem. But the thing is, Robert Redfield, who was head of the CDC at the time, he was one of the experts we were told to trust. He said 6 to 8 weeks of mask wearing would do the trick. He said that. That's one of the experts we were supposed to follow. And the thing is, at the time, masks were getting credit for that flat line. So to then say, well, we didn't say masks would solve the problem, but you almost did. When we got these lines, you almost did say that. Practically did. All right, so I myself will admit to you that, what do I know about any of this? Like I'm not in medicine, but obviously you don't have to be in medicine to read a chart. Like they've got you thinking that you need a PhD or an MD in something to read a damn chart. No, you don't. I mean, some of these people got MDs. It's almost like they specialized in not reading charts or anti-reading them or something. Hey, gang, my business partner, Paul Counts, just wrote to me to praise Crowd Health to the skies. He had just had knee surgery, and he couldn't say enough about it. You've heard me talk about it as a way I save money providing health care for my family and me, because we had some insane health insurance policy that just got more and more expensive all the time. Well, now they have their new Black Swan membership. It's the healthcare alternative for people who want autonomy over their care, their costs, and their lifestyle. So you're ready for those rare but potentially devastating Black Swan events in life. Well, nobody's really thrilled with their health insurance. And of course, everyone wonders, if something really devastating happened, how much would I be covered? Well, Crowd Health, the health insurance alternative, is offering the Black Swan membership. We're talking health care for under $100. That includes a team of health bill negotiators, low-cost prescription and lab testing tools, as well as a database of low-cost, high-quality doctors vetted by Crowd Health. And if something major should happen, you pay the first $15,000, then the crowd steps in to help fund the rest. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Black Swan moments might be rare, but good health insurance alternatives shouldn't be. Get started today for as low as just $80 per month for your first 3 months by using code WOODS at joincrowdhealth.com. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. Join crowdhealth.com, code WOODS. But I thought, well, I don't know, maybe masks could work. What do I know? Maybe. So I never said go out there and wear one. I thought, well, I don't know, I guess we'll wait and see. I don't know. But I'm all about the data. And when these charts kept coming out showing no difference, I changed my mind. I said, no, I guess they don't matter. I guess they don't matter. The classic gold standard in all this is the Cochrane Review, which went through all the research there is, found no benefit to masking. The chief researcher on that project, his name is oddly enough Tom Jefferson, said, quote, "It is irrational to mask." Although, let me correct myself here. That somebody said that there are two possible people who could have said that, but that was his thesis, was that it was irrational, made no sense because there's no benefit. There's no benefit to it. Now remember, Bavaria and Berlin actually mandated what I call the suffocation mask, or the duck mask, makes you look like a duck. So when I would see people walking by with those, I would quack at them because I was just tired of all the compliance. And my wife would elbow me, but I'd go quack, quack, as I see these people. And I was lectured to on Twitter by some libertarians who thought, well, it's voluntary. So, not every voluntary thing people do deserves respect. Just because you don't punch them in the face for it doesn't mean you have to respect it. You can chuckle. A free society also involves quacking when it's called for. Thank you, lone applauder. I appreciate that. So they mandated those masks in Germany. Okay, so you plot Germany against specifically Bavaria and Berlin, no difference. No difference. All right. Now, during this period, there was plenty of competition for the George Orwell Award, but making at least my personal top 10 is the American Academy of Pediatrics, without so much as an acknowledgement of the European experience where toddlers were not masked. The AAP had a case of absolute toddler mask fanaticism to the extent that they systematically removed from their website any article that had ever said that toddlers need to see human faces as part of their development. That just disappeared. They weren't disproven. There were no substitute papers. They're just gone. So they used to have a page called FaceTime and Emotional Health. And it was a description of how adults can enrich infants as young as 4 or 5 months old. And it repeatedly refers to facial cues and expressions. Try to find that. It's gone. That's not normal. That's not normal. Now, everything that happened during these years was put through the moralizing filter. So in October, November 2020, Lakers and Dodgers fans were blamed for a spike in cases that occurred in LA County. But the same spike occurred at the same time in San Diego. And in case you don't know anything about California sports, I can assure you, people in San Diego were not out cheering for the Dodgers. The collateral effects on society of these radical interventions can probably never be fully calculated. And some of them, like the way friends were pitted against each other and friendships were destroyed, families were pitted against themselves, you can't even quantify them. In some countries, 2 years went by with no education of any kind for children. Not Zoom school, not nothing. 2 years of nothing. In Myanmar, we heard stories of people resorting to eating snakes and rats. What was done to Africa was a crime against humanity all its own. There's a book by a guy named Toby Green, who's a leftist, called The COVID Consensus. And he means that in a macabre sort of way. He's a leftist, but he says that the lockdown policies were crimes against the poor and vulnerable, which they obviously were. Kevin Bardosh did a full comprehensive review of the lockdown harms, and he concluded this: the promotion of lengthy social distancing restrictions by governments and scientific experts during the COVID crisis had severe consequences for hundreds of millions of people. Many original predictions are broadly supported by the cumulative research data presented above: a rise in non-COVID excess mortality, mental health deterioration, child abuse and domestic violence, widening global inequality, large increases in debt, food insecurity, lost educational opportunities, unhealthy lifestyle behaviors, etc. Then we have the NBER, the National Bureau of Economic Research, arguing that the lockdown unemployment shock, so they're talking about the tens of millions of people who were suddenly thrown out of work, was projected to result in between 840,000 and 1.22 million excess deaths over the next 15 to 20 years. The New York Times even reported that because of the lockdowns, in the coming years, there would be 1.4 million excess tuberculosis deaths, 500,000 excess HIV deaths, and another 385,000 excess malaria deaths. Now, none of this neglect of collateral effects would have surprised Mises. Mises explained all the way back in 1944 that it was in the nature of bureaucracy itself to neglect collateral effects and instead to focus obsessively on its area of immediate concern. So Mises wrote, "Governments encourage the specialists who limit their observations to a narrow field without bothering about the further consequences of a policy. The labor economist deals only with the immediate results of pro-labor policies. The farm economist only with the rise of agricultural prices. Today, in most countries, each department follows its own course, working against the endeavors of the other departments. The Department of Labor aims at higher wage rates and at lower living costs. But since nobody's looking at the whole picture, the same administration's Department of Agriculture aims at higher food prices, and the Department of Commerce tries to raise domestic commodity prices by tariffs. One department fights against monopoly, but other departments are eager to bring about by tariffs, patents, and other means the conditions required for the building of monopolistic restraint. And each department refers to the expert opinion of those specialized in their respective fields." Well, during the COVID years, we heard a lot of state propaganda about social distancing and masks and why your kid couldn't go to the playground. But what we did not hear were the stories of people who suffered under these restrictions. There are more of those than you can possibly believe. But you were shamed if you criticized the policies because it showed you allegedly didn't care about human life. But of course, it was those people who didn't care about it because there are a lot of things that come together to make human life possible. And if human life was about nothing other than simply preserving a heartbeat, then we could all live isolated, each one of us, in a windowless room and somebody slipping us cans of Navy beans through a slot in the door. But that's not really what human life is. And not to mention, the things they did killed people. So there's nothing to be said for them at all. I used to get emails from people about these stories, telling me their stories, because I write an email newsletter. And these were people who had no one else to talk to because their families thought they were crazy, their friends wouldn't talk to them. So they wrote to me, a stranger who sent them email newsletters, because they thought at least I would listen. At least somebody would listen. So I actually compiled, with their permission, I compiled some of their stories. And I put it in one of the bonuses at diaryofcovid.com is you get a free copy of the second book, which is called Collateral Damage. And they tell their stories. And yes, they would like to see justice, but at the very least, they just want to be heard, and not accused of anything, but just heard. And I've got 2 minutes according to this clock, so here's how I'm gonna use them. It's very startling to hear policymakers ever admit mistakes. They generally don't. Why would they? But we've now started to hear some of them admit it. I'll share just one. The absolutely loathsome Francis Collins, who used to direct the National Institutes of Health, now directed by Jay Bhattacharya, who wrote the foreword to my book. Francis Collins said, "As a guy living inside the Beltway, feeling a sense of crisis, trying to decide what to do in some situation room in the White House, we weren't really considering the consequences in communities that were not New York City or some other big city. If you're a public health person and you're trying to make a decision, you have this very narrow view of what the right decision is, and that is something that will save a life. It doesn't matter what else happens, so you attach infinite value to stopping the disease and saving a life. You attach zero value to whether this actually totally disrupts people's lives, ruins the economy, and has many kids kept out of school in a way that they never quite recovered. This is a public health mindset. And I think a lot of us involved in trying to make those recommendations had that mindset, and it was really unfortunate. It was another mistake we made. Well, thanks a lot for nothing, Francis Collins. Well, I'll conclude with this. The libertarian world, I would give it a C+ in how it handled this situation. This was our opportunity to shine. And I'll just say the Libertarian Party was an outright embarrassment during this period. Well, as long as mask wearing is voluntary, we should, that is all you have to say in the wake of this? Get out of town. But I can tell you something. The Mises Institute was solid. The Mises Institute held its events. Everything went on as normal. We're all still here. There were regulations in town that said any facility that is open to the public, there's a mask mandate. So at the Mises Institute, what did they do? They plastered over all the doors, not open to the public. So no masks. We had events. We had fellowship. We fought against this in all different ways, through activism, through scholarship, through videos, at a time when even some of our own people, their own knees started to buckle. But one thing you can rely on is that the Mises Institute just ain't never going to buckle, and God bless it. Thank you very much. All right, everybody, remember, as I said in the presentation, diaryofcovid.com is where you can go to get the book at cost. I send it to you for what it costs me to get it shipped to me, buy envelopes for it, buy mailing labels, put them in there and send it. So there's nowhere you're going to get it for less than you'd get it at diaryofcovid.com. Even if you already have the book, you should still go to diaryofcovid.com, again, as I said in the presentation, because that's where you can get the bonuses. You might as well get the bonuses. So diaryofcovid.com, and you will also enjoy the tremendous Dan Smott's video. And if you ever need video work done, you will see that this is the guy you want to use. He did such an amazing job at diaryofcovid.com. So go check that out. That's your homework assignment. Until tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.